Well, thank you and welcome to the Department of Computer Science. I'm Eric Neufeld, head of the department, and I'd really like to thank the organizers of STEMFest for choosing to kick off their event in the department with the GameFest. I also want to quickly thank Kevin Stanley for taking the lead on this activity, and you're also going to, you'll be meeting Brittany, who's also played a leading role. Both of them have been media stars this week. Not to mention Rod, and I'm going to forget a whole bunch of other people. I was supposed to keep this short. You told me not to. Anyways, thanks to Rodrigo. He was my TA last year. He's great, and he organized a couple of game jams here. I'd especially like to thank Scott McGillivray and Lee Vermeulen for coming out all this way and sharing their expertise from the game world with us. I just kind of had to laugh, you know. I thought I better put on a coat since I was introducing a speaker who showed up in a t-shirt and blue jeans. But that's the way it is in this crazy industry. I'd like to thank all you participants for showing up. It's going to be a great weekend, and I hope you have a fun and productive weekend in the labs departments. And now over to Kevin.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. You had us scared there for a little while, the late registrations. We're very pleased to have Scott McGillivray be our keynote speaker to kick off our Game Jam. Scott is a technical director at Capcom Vancouver and has been in the game and entertainment industry for about a decade.
About that, yeah.
Yep. And he's apparently going to talk about Chun-Li.
Okay. Is this mic working? Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Sort of good enough? Okay, cool. Yeah, so technical director, what does that mean? It's an interesting title. It basically means a senior engineer. When you get into the real world, chances are your first job you're going to be reporting to another engineer, somebody writing code with you who's going to be your mentor and probably schedule your tasks, review some of your changes, help you out a little bit. You'll probably help him out a little bit because you'll know some things he doesn't, and eventually he's going to try not to do any work so you can do all the coding for him, and then he'll take the credit for it. So that's basically what I do. I've been in the game industry for about 10 years. Before that, I worked for a robotics company in the .com days, and that was pretty awesome. The .coms died, and I had to find a new place to go to work. So EA is this gigantic company that we all know very well. We either love them or we hate them. In Vancouver, we love them very much because they hire 2,000 people, and yeah, they're always looking for new grads all the time. They're always looking for good programmers. So, it's one of many, many game studios in Vancouver that are always looking for people like you to come work for. So, if you do recognize me, you might recognize my name. That's not me. That's the guy who has a home improvement TV show. But I also have my own astronomy show on Global TV. I'm not sure if they show it here in Saskatchewan, but in BC, if you Google Space Talk with Scott, you'll find my show, and I'm on for 10 minutes every Sunday morning at 7:40 a.m. And we talk about astronomy and astronomy news. So, everyone, there's a lunar eclipse happening on Sunday. So I hope to see all of you there. I'm going to be out at the observatory. I heard Jordan here from Noodle Cake. I heard he might have access to the observatory. He's also a very good guy to make friends with because he has his own game company that we probably all know about. So anyway, here's me in a video game. This was my first job at Electronic Arts. Actually, that wasn't the first game. That was about the third game I worked on. That was Need for Speed Undercover. Obviously, graphics have come a long ways since then, but that's me. They actually intentionally blurred out my face. It's not just bad resolution. I was supposed to be this anonymous guy on Cops, and so we had all these cut scenes where we animated myself getting beat up by these other guys. Now, I couldn't find anything that showed their faces, but these were all guys who worked on the game team. So, you wonder where the people come from who are modeling these characters in games. They're usually people on the team. So that comes down to this. Why am I here? There's one reason I came here, and it's not because I love public speaking. I came here because I want to hire you. The single best thing that you can put on your resume is this Game Jam. because there are so many computer science students out there, and there's so many grads every year, and we get so many resumes. So if anybody graduates from university with a computer science degree, we already know that they can write code. But, you know, video games, it's not about just writing code. It's about a business, and it's about developing a game. And there's a certain method that, you know, a lot of students aren't going to do. They're not going to learn in school how to make a game. Well, you guys are. You know, this GameJam is awesome. You're going to come out of this with some experiences of, like, you know, you're going to get to use Unity. You're going to see what it's like working with other people, trying to reach a deadline, trying to just make something fun. Like, you're going to get out there. You're going to, like, put your game together. Something you thought was going to be awesome is going to suck. And I want you to cut it right away and find something that's fun and say, hey, this is really cool, and I want you to build on that. And these are the things that we do every day. Now, if I get some random computer science grad coming in for an interview, I don't know if they know that. If I get one of you coming in, you already know that because you've been through that. And the fact that you're applying for a game studio means that you enjoy what you did here, and this is what you want to do, because you're going to do it, like, every day, 9 to 5, for the rest of your life. So, yeah, so I'm going to tell a little story here, the tricks of the trade. And this is about applying some of the stuff that you as software engineers, you know, some of the stuff that, you know, this is about applying it to the business and how to make video games. And I always love the story of the Nintendo Wii. You know, we've probably all played the Wii. Some of us who are a little older than others, you know, saw it from a different perspective because we've seen many, many versions of the Nintendo come out, many, many versions of the Xbox and the PlayStation. So along comes the Nintendo Wii, and this was about 2006. This was a time when Microsoft and Sony had gigantic pockets. I'll get into that in a second, but the Wii was this vision of this guy, an absolutely brilliant man, Satoru Iwata. He died this year of cancer, but I had the chance to meet him. He was a former engineer like us. He ended up becoming the CEO of Nintendo, and he just had some fantastic ideas. He really understood the business of making money in software and what the consumer actually wanted, and it wasn't what Microsoft and Sony thought. So Microsoft and Sony just kept dumping more and more money and technology into their hardware. They said people want faster graphics, you know, they want to see everything in 1080p and 60 frames a second, you know, and they want more CPU horsepower. We want to see like 50 AI things on the screen, and they got to be super smart. So you get these two consoles that they developed, and they come out, and, you know, the Microsoft is using this Xenon processor. I think it's a 6-core machine. PlayStations, if you ever worked with one of these things, they actually changed the number of CPUs that you could have throughout the lifetime of this thing because some of them were unstable. But you ended up getting 7 cores there, and here was the price point for the consumer. It was $400 and $600. That's a lot of money, and especially in 2006, when we were used to paying $99 for a PlayStation 2. Suddenly it's a $600 machine. Nobody could afford that. So anyway, what does Nintendo say? They've got Mario, you know, and Mario is this brand that people know when you pick up a game, if Mario is on that game, you're getting a good product. So Satoru looks at the game industry and he sees, okay, this is the family structure. You've got different people in the family. You've got people who love video games. They absolutely, this is all they think about. And then you've got people in the family who hate video games. Which one of these people controls the money? Exactly. So he saw this as this business model is just messed up. You know, we need to tap into the people who are spending the family budget. We need to get them buying our product and not someone else's. And he also recognized there's this whole other demographic that nobody has ever gone after with video games. You know, they have a lot of money and a lot of time. Let's go get them. So he came up with, here's the Nintendo Wii. The philosophy behind it, if you were to turn on, did anyone here have one of the original Xbox 360s, the red ring ones? You know, a few of us did. Yeah, 3 of them, 4 of them. And what happened when you turned that thing on? What did you hear? There was a huge fan in that. You know, I never owned a PlayStation 3, but, you know, They were this gigantic barbecue that would sit there, you know, under your big TV, and they were kind of hideous. Most families don't want this in their living room, but Satoru was like, you know, we want our Wii to be this nice little console that people are going to put in their living room. The family's going to gather around this thing, and they're going to love it. It's going to be a centerpiece, and we want people coming by their house saying, "What's this? This is our Wii. It's great." You also look at the controller. This is an Xbox One controller. 21 buttons. That's intimidating. If I'm not a very veteran gamer, I'm scared by this controller. You know, this is just overwhelming. And also game designers, as somebody who worked in the industry as a programmer, when a game designer sees this, they think, hey, there's 21 buttons. I need to think of 21 different actions that the player can do. And so you end up with these really bizarre features in the game that are like, as a programmer, you're like, oh, this is so much work. There's no payoff. And the only reason we're doing it is because we want to use up all the buttons on this controller. So at some point in your career, you're going to have to tell people no and say, look, this is too much work. Sorry. You know, you're just going to have to leave that button blank. So Nintendo, they wanted to come up with a better idea for the controller, something that wasn't as intimidating. So these are a lot of the prototypes that they came up with. You know, the one in the middle there, that's my favorite. That one was called the cheese wheel. And so the idea was you would hold it. It had some accelerometers in it. It had one button right in the middle. And the idea was you would hold it in the air and you'd kind of wave it around the room and you'd play the game that way. And it ended up being something incredibly heavy and incredibly cumbersome. You know, you can't play anything with this. It's just awful. I want one really bad, though. I would love to come to like a gaming party and use that thing. So, you know, we had all these different designs were coming out, and in typical business fashion, you had some executives who were like, no, this isn't good, that isn't good. And they kept sending the hardware guys back to the drawing board. And this one guy, he was actually an intern, so he was still a university student. He was a hardware engineer, and he got right up in Satoru's face, and he got so mad, he said, I'm going to give you a stick. You don't even know what you want, so I'm just going to give you a stick and put a couple buttons on it. That's it. And he just disappeared. And he came back with that one on the left. You know, and that was the original prototype for the Wii remote. And here's what it is today. And it was the most brilliant thing ever. You know, you look at this controller, and it's, how many buttons are on there? Well, you know, I can see a couple obvious ones. There's actually only 7 functional buttons, right? How many are there? I don't know. Anyway, there's not many. But then if you look inside this thing, you know, we have, what do we got? We got a speaker on there. There's an accessory port so we can attach a nunchuck. There's actually some third-party controllers you can plug into this thing. You know, it was quite brilliant, so it's very expandable. That speaker in there is super cheap. You know, it only costs about 50 cents, so we're not breaking the bank like Sony's doing with their $600 console. You know, these things you can manufacture them. At the time, when this came out, you could walk down to Future Shop and buy one for 20 bucks. You know, so there was your collection of 4. I got mine here. I carry it everywhere I go. The other cool feature with this, and this is something that the PlayStation 3 had one accelerometer in it, in the controller, but it wasn't very good. And developers didn't really use it because they were basically making the game for 2 consoles. They were making them for the Xbox and for the PlayStation 3. And it didn't make sense to try add a feature on the PlayStation that used this accelerometer. They said, no, we're just going to map across the thumbsticks and the buttons, and we're just going to make the same game. So they just ignored the accelerometer. So this is the greatest controller ever made because it was just genius. You know, it's not expensive and it's so functional. This accelerometer, the accelerometers in here, you have 3 of them. You've got, you know, your X, Y, Z that I'm showing there. Does anyone know why the Y direction is up in this? Y is always up. Okay. Well, I'll give out a prize if anybody can think of it before the time that the slide comes up here. Do you know what it is?
Because screens are X and Y that way, Z outside.
No. Nope. So, yeah, if anybody can actually think of it, though, before I get to the slide, you know, I will give you, I have some swag in here for people. Nope. Nope. So, let's see, where was I going with this slide here? Oh, yeah. So these 3 accelerometers, when you get the X, Y, and Z, you have the 3 of them in there. But what they basically do is tell you which direction gravity is pulling in. So if I take it and I tilt it left and right, see I've got my Y on there because this was the one that I used when I worked for Electronic Arts right when this thing came out. And I've still got my Y label on there to show me, hey, this is the Y accelerometer. And as I tilt it this way, you know, my Z, I think this one's the Z and the Y are going to change, but the X stays the same because they're always telling me which direction's down. If you take this and you spin it this way, what's it going to tell me? Exactly. It's not going to tell me anything. Try it out. If you have a Wii at home, take the controller and do this, and nothing happens because down is still the same direction. The steering wheel. So the idea with this controller, you know, yeah, it's a stick, but you can hold it all these different ways. Like if I'm playing tennis, I can swing it like a racket. I can hold it like a steering wheel. So working on Need for Speed, I had to develop the steering wheel thing. And so the idea was you would hold it sideways, and it would act just like a steering wheel. And this seriously happened, and I can't believe it happened because it was a huge waste of money. But we flew 5 of our executives, maybe it wasn't a waste of money, they all got to go to the Porsche test track at Leipzig. And they went around in Porsches, and they gathered all of the data off of this car. You know, it was hooked up with all the inputs, gas, brakes, steering input, G-force, everything like that. They took all the telemetry of where it was going around the track at all the different points, and they came back and they gave all that data to me, which is pretty cool. I didn't get to go with them. And they came back and they said, map that to this controller. And because I was the physics lead on Need for Speed, and I was also the controller lead for the Wii. And so they said, map all this data to the controller. We want it to match exactly. And I figured out something right away. No matter what you do with this, it's not a steering wheel, it's a stick. You know, even you see all these accessories out there that you can plug this thing into, those don't change anything. It's a lot easier to play the game just holding it this way and tilting it side to side. And I was like, I would give this to people and say, okay, here, play the game, and we mapped, you know, steering controls exactly, and people just couldn't drive the car, and it was just, and I was trying it myself, and I'm like, this is awful. And I realized that, like, steering wheels are bolted to the dashboard, or if you have the steering wheel controller, it's bolted to the table. This isn't bolted to anything. So for me to turn it like an actual steering wheel, it doesn't really feel the same way. I'm not going to be at high speed doing this with it, and at slow speed, you know, wrapping my hand around a bunch of times. And if I take this thing and I try to do that, well, now I haven't done anything. The input's still the same, right? You flip it over, it's only telling me which direction's down. We also found from some of our focus groups that people hold this in all sorts of different directions. Like they might hold it facing this way using the thumbs on the buttons. Some use their fingers. So what that meant was I had to make this thing work using only the Z-axis. I couldn't use the X and the Y at all because there was no guarantee of what direction that was going to be in. And it gave me 90 degrees to play with because as soon as somebody goes past, well, now my Z-axis is going back to 0. So what we tried doing, we found that people had a lot of trouble driving straight. So this is, again, a horrible design decision. I was in on this. I'm sad to say it. But see that steering wheel right in the middle there? That's actually connected to the input of the Z-axis of the Wii remote. And we said, well, people can't even drive the car straight, so maybe if we show them on the screen where their steering wheel is, that'll help them like figure out when they're going straight. I'm like, after we did it, I was like, oh, that was such a bad decision because you can just look down and see it. And the fact that you still can't play the game means something else is wrong. And I finally figured it out on Need for Speed Pro Street. Let's see here where we're getting with our slides. So this is how people would, okay, never mind. I got my slides a bit out of order here. Let's see here. So if you notice that there, another thing I noticed from that steering wheel, it was actually a really good debugging tool because it's at a 45-degree angle there, or about a 45-degree angle. Well, when I took that screenshot, I wasn't holding this at a 45-degree angle. I was holding it at about a 30-degree angle. And why is that? So if I have a vector, let's say Let's say this is my unit vector straight up. The y component's 1, the x is 0, the z is 0. But let's say just x and y for 2D. Straight up, 1, 0. If I rotate this 45 degrees, what's my y component? 707. Yeah. That's exactly it. And so many games out there think that if I rotate it 45 degrees, I'm at halfway. And that's not how math works. So what you need to do when you take this input, there's your curve of x versus y as I rotate this thing around. You need to take the arc, whatever, arc tangent, arc whatever, of that line, and then you'll get your straight value. There's another problem in here. I figured out after this why people can't drive a car straight. Am I holding this flat? No, I'm not. And no matter how hard I try, I'm human, I shake. This thing's going to give me some inputs. This is a very sensitive device. So it's absolutely impossible to hold it on 0. So this is what I did with the input, is I put this dead area in there. And then you could do some extrapolation, you know, to make up for it. We also found something that it kicks in really hard. If I use this here, well, nothing's happening. It's just dead, dead, dead. Then suddenly the steering kicks in really hard, even though I haven't really moved the Wii remote a lot more. So, you know, use your math skills, play with these values a bunch, see how it plays in the game. You know, you might be doing this. You might be doing something like this weekend, you know, when you're mucking about with your controller. Try to find a way to show the input on the screen, see how you can use some math to massage that, little signal processing. So this is what the steering curve looks like on Need for Speed. Great. Now the game, if I want to turn that car hard, I really got to yank the wheel over. Here's another thing that I noticed. People still couldn't play the game. You know, and this is just how it goes with controller development. You know, all our execs thought, hey, we could just map across the steering wheel and this thing's going to work. No, not even close. You know, it's give the person the controller, see what they do, iterate on it. I had to iterate with 50 different people, grab them from all around the office. I was grabbing people who didn't play games, grabbing some of our veterans, you know. And this is what I noticed. So here's how we steer, is we're steering left to right. And if people wanted to take a really easy corner, they would do this. There's an easy corner. Nice, long, sloping thing. If people wanted to take a really sharp corner, like a right angle city corner, they would do this. See my input? Still the same. But if we look at the speed, it would go slow and fast. So this is the secret. After I did this, stuff just woke up, and suddenly it was a lot of fun to drive the car. So this is the secret to doing a driving game with an accelerometer, is you've got to look at more than just the position. You know, we all know what the position is. Here's some physics for you. We're going to apply it now in games. We do it all the time. Position is a point in space. So this is a position. That's a position. Well, we call it a rotation, but some of our gaming veterans would know this. But we consider position. Next thing in there is our velocity. So I would factor in the velocity, and suddenly the controller woke up. The next one is we actually have acceleration. I tried out the acceleration because I thought I'm onto something, you know. So we started measuring the acceleration and how fast people were snapping this thing. And all that I found was, you know, the more derivatives you calculate, the more data you need, and just the more noisy and useless your signal gets. But until you actually do it, you know, until you actually learn these things, nobody knows. You know, you're revolutionizing software. There's nobody. The way to make a blockbuster game is you've got to be the first guy to do something. You know, you've got to go out and you've got to try stuff. Find out what works, what doesn't, and go with what works. So here's acceleration. Sorry, that went pretty quickly. Does anyone know what snap is? It's like the next derivative of acceleration. So you feel this when you're like on a train or something and it's coming right to a stop, and right at the very end when the acceleration stops and you sort of get slammed forward a little bit, and there's nothing that you can do. No engineer, like a train engineer or a railroad designing engineer type, nobody can actually get rid of that. You know, you're always going to feel snap when you come to a stop. So they try to minimize it as much as possible. Nintendo made a train game. It had this special controller where you would drive a train. It was like Railroad Tycoon. You would drive a train around Japan, and they actually factored snap in. And when you were playing the game, you would have to focus on the snap. Otherwise, you could derail your train because you get these massive oscillations going up and down the train, and it would pull it off the tracks. There's another derivative to that, is crackle. Any guesses what the next derivative is? Yeah, pop. But, you know, some of these things like snap is sort of the last one that we actually care about in the real world. You know, after this, these are just, yeah, they're out there in theory, but they're really just useless and noisy, and they don't really do anything. Okay, so here's what I was going to give away the swag for. This is why the Y direction is always up. It's a thing called Gimbal Lock. So if I'm rotating on my X, Y, and Z axis, I guess X, Y, well, whatever. I've got my X, Y, and Z. You can reach a situation where if I take the nose of that plane and I point it straight up, I've got gimbal lock. My X and Z are now the same axis. You know, if I'm rotating using my Eulers, let's see. The order that you do your rotations is very important when you're rotating X, Y, Z. So if I was to rotate, like, let's say X, Y, Z, here's where I end up. If I rotate, say, Y, Z, X, now I'm pointing down there. So the order you do your rotations is important. The reason we always use Y second and Y represents the, so we do them in order, X, Y, Z, but we always make Y point straight up, is because in gaming, very rarely are you looking straight down, you know, or straight up. Usually the camera is circling around the player. Could you imagine what the game would be like if you had gimbal lock, if you were trying to run around the world and every once in a while you get stuck and there was no way I could step sideways? I would have to, like, do this crazy weird route to get out of it. And this actually happens. So, you know, that's why when you try it, if you look straight up or straight down with the camera and you try move it side to side, all you get is spinning out of it. You got to move it down, and then you can start moving it around again. Let's see here. Yeah, quaternions. Does anyone know what a quaternion is? Got a few of you. Anyone who doesn't know what a quaternion is? You have the rest of your educational career to figure out what a quaternion is. Go home, Google it, figure out why we use it. It's a four-dimensional vector, and you can use this to solve the gimbal lock problem. If you want to be an animator in video games, this is all you are ever going to use, is quaternions. So this is something you can head home and Google. Okay, back to Wii Sports here. So this is a great part of the business model with Nintendo, and it's something that I want you guys to be doing when you're making your game today, is find the fun. Find what's fun and build on it. So when Nintendo makes a game, they don't spend any money on visual effects until that game's fun. And so when this guy was developing this stick controller, this is what they used for boxing, was just these debug shapes. It was just some quick squares that he put in there, and they played the game. And they played it until it was fun. And this game was never even supposed to go past there. It was just a sort of demo. They had one for golf, one for tennis, one for bowling. And they were like, yeah, we're just going to leave it here, and then we can develop the controller, and, you know, and we'll send it out there. We'll ship the console with Mario. Well, guess what? There was a Mario game that wasn't ready yet. So suddenly they said, well, you know what? Everyone around the office is playing this Wii Sports. So let's, you know, well, they've named it Wii Sports. They're playing this sports demo. Let's put some graphics on it. So the game was totally done. You could play it in cubes before they ever started adding art. You know, so find that in yours. Before you start worrying about making it look pretty and everything else like that, make sure you've found the fun, something you can build off of, because that's what sells games. You know, people want to have a lot of fun playing it. Art gets old and boring in a hurry if there's nothing else there. Tennis. Okay, this is your first trick of the trade that I'm going to show you. Has anyone heard the myth, maybe not a myth, maybe a legend, that in tennis, in bowling, in these Wii Sports games, that after you let go of the bowling ball, you can steer it down the lane if you tilt the... Some of us have heard it, same with tennis, that you can make it go up or down, or you can actually steer it after you hit it. Have you tried it? Have you tried to steer it? Does it work? Really? With a bowling ball it does? I could never get it to work. But it is true, because I met, when I met Satoru, and then I got to hang out with a bunch of his engineers, and I asked them about this, and they showed me what tennis actually does. So here's how you use the tennis racket. I take it, and I hit the tennis ball, and right when I get here, this thing vibrates a little bit. I hear a sound that goes whack, and I see on the screen that I've hit the ball, and I finish my swing, but I hit it back here, right? If I want to hit a high shot, I can hit my high shot. If I want to hit a low shot, I can hit my low shot. Here's my high shot, whack. Here's my low shot, whack. So what they're doing is they're actually still reading your input for about a quarter second after you've hit it. And if we were to look at a side view of what the tennis ball does, here's how a high shot works. Awesome, eh? Can you tell from that angle that that's what's happening? There's your first trick of the trade. So if you're really clever about where you put the camera, where you put the players, and how you move objects through the air, you can actually you can do cool things. You can bend the flight of stuff, and nobody will ever know that you're doing it. Need for Speed. Game that I worked on. Here's something that I did. Okay, I've got my Lamborghini, and I'm turning into a corner. Does anyone know what's around that corner there? Trouble. I have no idea. I can't see what's going on back there. Now, so we tried all these things throughout Need for Speed. There was one version in Pro Street where you would come up closer to the corner, and the camera would look into it. Like, we would have the world map. We would know where the track was going. So the camera, even if I was trying to drive straight into the wall, the camera would start looking over to the right. And it was just awful to try control the game in there, because it's like, hey, I'm trying to drive the car, and I want to know what I'm doing, and my head's moving all over, and I had no idea what direction the car was heading in. So nobody played that way. Here's how cameras like that usually work. I've got the position of the camera is my circle there. That's the eye, and I'm looking straight at the middle of the car. So when I turn, I'm still looking at the middle of the car, and that's what I see. I see a lot more to the left and very little to the right, but my car is driving to the right. Well, there's a way to fix that, is instead of looking at the car, look at a point about 1 or 2 feet in front of the front bumper. And so now, when my car turns, right now, if I'm driving straight, I'm still looking down that straight road. And as soon as I look to the right, well, now I'm looking a little bit in front of the front bumper, and I'm looking into that corner. So that's your second trick of the trade. If you're making a driving game, you might want to try doing that with your camera. See if there's a way you can do it in Unity. Rubber banding. Is anyone familiar with this term? Yeah, rubber banding is something it's a very debated thing in video games, right? And the reason I bring up Madden is this happened to be one of the worst cases of rubber banding ever known. There was a version that came out that basically you could not have a game against the AI with a point spread of more than about 10, because if it got too far behind, it would start completing impossible passes at you, and there was nothing you could do to stop it. It was just suddenly it would just march down the field out of nowhere, and okay, now the game's close again, and it's coming right down to the wire. So you don't want to do stuff like that. The same thing happened if you got ahead. Suddenly the game would become so boring, it would let you catch up, and it's like, whoa, I don't even want to win, and suddenly, my guys can't get tackled, and they're just like getting first downs all the time. Here's how we did rubber banding in Need for Speed. Now, granted, a driving game is a lot easier to do your rubber banding with, but you want to do some stuff that's very subtle that hopefully the user never notices. Like, they can notice after the race, that it happened, to say, oh, that was a close one, but during the race, you really don't want them to know what's going on. So what we would do is there we go. So that line there represents, let's just say that that's the limit of my visibility, how far I can see. So if I'm in one of the 2 front cars, I know about that other car beside me, but I don't know about the one behind me. If I'm in one of those back cars, or if I'm in the back car there, these two guys are so far ahead of me down the track that I can't see them. I know they're out there somewhere. So what we do is we actually take the physics of the other cars in the game and we tweak their numbers. You know, maybe we give their engine more horsepower based on their position in the race. And these are cool things you can do with the physics in your game here. If you're doing, you know, if you're doing a driving game again or any other kind of game, you know, throughout the game, if you want to give the player a little boost, just juice the numbers a little bit. You know, you can always reset them back to normal, you know, later on. This is how you do power-ups in games. You know, you want a speed power-up, just for a few seconds there, give them twice the horsepower, see what happens. So this is how we do it based on the, you know, that graph is the horsepower versus position in the race. You can do it with a lot of different things, though. And this actually came up in my interview. This is how I got hired. I was playing Need for Speed Most Wanted, and I had a perfect record. I was like 20-0 in my races, and I finally got to the point in my career. I got to a race I couldn't get past. And I kept playing it and playing it and playing it, and I would get right to the end, and the AI would just go right past me, and he'd win. And I'm like, this is crap, you know? And so I was like, okay, reset. Let's start again. I don't want to ruin the perfect record. And I kept doing it, and I brought it up in my interview with the guy who was interviewing me. I'm like, what's going on? Like, how do I beat this guy? You know, I kept doing it, and he's like, oh, he goes, yeah, you got to lose a race. And well, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, you know, the performance of the AI is dependent on your score in the race, or on your win-loss record. And suddenly I was like, it makes perfect sense. The better a player is, you know, it's like if you want really new players, people who aren't very good at games, you know, or people who are awesome at games and do it professionally, you want them to all have a good time playing a video game, you've got to do some good rubber banding in there. They're going to have you want them to have a competitive experience, but they're going to have to compete against different levels of AI, and this is how they figured out how good a player was and how well they were doing, is the more races you would win, the tougher they make the AI. The more you lose, the easier the AI becomes. So they had this line that kind of looked a little bit like this. And because I saw the line, you know, I saw it when I started my first day. I'm like, oh, you know, and this is based on your win-loss record. So take anything you want in the game, make some tweaks, you know, you rubber band all you want. Aim assist. Of course, we've all heard of aim assist. Yeah, this is another trick that you can use. Even Halo does this. Halo tried bringing in some professional gamers. I know because my best friend works on Halo. They tried bringing in professional gamers. They turned off the aim assist, and they wanted to see how many headshots they got. And there were some guys. These are guys who make hundreds of thousands of dollars playing Halo tournaments. If you're really good at Halo, you might want to do that, but chances are none of us are. I've seen some guys who are awesome, and they're not even close. But they didn't get it. A lot of them didn't even get any headshots. So what they're doing here is I've got my reticle. I'm colorblind, so I have a lot of trouble with this picture. Can you see the reticle above the player in the middle? Some of us can see it. So this is, it's not quite on the guy's head, but what they do is they actually bend the bullet while it's in flight towards the player's head. You know, so you don't need to be totally on it. You can still get your headshot. Another thing that they do is when you're moving your reticle across the screen, when you're very close to a target like this, to a player's head or a player's body, they have a few points that they target out, you know, so I'll be moving with a constant input on my controller, and it moves across, and then when I get close, they slow it down a little bit, and they slow it down, and then it goes faster again. But the trick is you don't want to suddenly slow it down because the user will see that. You want to gradually do it. So just keep playing with your numbers. Play with that XY graph. Bend your curve a little bit. Try to find a really subtle thing that the user's not going to notice. That's when the magic happens, is when people know that they're being helped out, but they have no idea how you did it. Here's another one for driving. Back to this screenshot. I did this one. We did this on Need for Speed Pro Street. A driving assist is if I'm going into this corner, how do I make that perfect corner? Let's say this is the perfect corner. What I did was I took an AI driver that we cranked all the way up to the top so it would race the ideal. If the professional race car driver was playing our game, this is the exact race line that he would take. This is the exact steering he would do. And and I would just figure out what that vector is, what direction he wants to steer in. And then I take the user's steering, which was maybe somewhere off, and then you blend them a little bit. Let's say I'm going to take 80% of the user and 20% of the professional driver. And this is what I get. I get slightly better steering. So what I'm doing here is I'm making the player a little better than they really are. You know, and you try this, and again, like, the player's going to play this, and they're like, yeah, I'm so good at this game. It's like, well, you're getting helped a little bit. But you got to be careful when you do this, because what if a person wants to crash their car? You know, you can't be mucking with their controls if they're trying to do something you don't want them to do. So if a player steered out here, the way that we stop this is I look at the forward vector of the car, and if you look at a two-dimensional cross product is going to give you a float. It's going to give you one number. It's going to be positive or negative depending which way I'm steering. So you look at the sign of, you take the two cross products, you multiply them. You look at the sign. If the sign's positive, then they're both trying to steer in the same direction, so you turn that assist on. As soon as you turn the other direction, that shuts off. Hollywood. Can you drive like this in the real world? You know, maybe there's a couple people that can. So there's all this stuff about, you know, when I was working on Need for Speed, everybody I knew, my family, family friends, everyone was talking about Forza. They're like, oh yeah, Forza, they went out, they played the game, they tested it, they got all the numbers, and they match exactly what the professionals put up on the test tracks. Like, they got it bang on, their simulation's perfect. And my answer for that is, those are professional drivers. They're driving with the steering wheel. It's not some couch surfer playing with a thumbstick. And the other thing is, real life simulation is boring. You know, it's even that professional driver is not going to be able to do the Hollywood jumping. He's probably not going to be able to do this and outrun the cops. You know, he's very careful when he's driving like this. So real life physics sucks. It's boring. Take your numbers. Don't worry about real life. Jack them up. You know, make your cars fun. Make your guys run faster. Make your guns shoot bigger explosions. Like, do all these things. Crank up the numbers. Don't worry about the simulation. There's a market for simulations, but for the most part, video games are about excitement, right? Club Penguin. Friend of mine, Lance Preeb. You know, we both, the two of us have very similar lives. We grew up down the street from each other in Kelowna. The only difference was he has been bought out 3 times in his life. One time was when he made Club Penguin, and Disney paid him $1 billion. And here I am working for my salary at Capcom. So Club Penguin he started this in his basement, and what he did was everything that he did, he made the cheapest possible technical decision that he could. He said, I want to do as little work as possible, have as little technology as possible. And so this is why he chose penguins. I need something that's about the size of a penguin here. Do we have anything? I don't know, some sort of, I could use your purse, but I don't want to do that. No, well, okay, yeah. So this is our penguin. And so if you're playing a game like, say, Grand Theft Auto, and you've got a guy running around the world, he's running and he's moving all over like this, and he turns and he has to do all these cool moves, he's throwing punches, he holds up his gun. There are a ton of moving parts in that, right? And so when we made Dead Rising 3, our animation team that was only responsible for making characters move, for making zombies move, for making bosses move, for making the player move, for making them fight, for making them walk, run, whatever, we had a team of probably 20 people. There was about 5 programmers, all guys very good at quaternions. We had about 10 artists. You know, there were just tons of people. All they did was animation and locomotion just for those moving parts. Club Penguin, he chose penguins because this is how a penguin moves. There are no moving parts. You know, you can just walk it around the world and just use a few math tweaks to rotate that to make it look like it's waddling. So That's how you make $1 billion. I had one other slide here. This is my boring slide. I threw it in at the last minute after hanging out at Noodle Cake for the afternoon. This just came into my head. I was like, you know what? I should really throw this into the presentation. This is my only one with PowerPoints. Level of detail. Some of you might have heard this word. Some of you might have not. On Dead Rising 3, this is how we did tons and tons of zombies. We have 1,000 zombies in the world. You know, no other game does that. I guess Assassin's Creed has gigantic crowds of people. This is how they do it. They use level of detail. Stuff that's up close, everything's in high definition. The further away it gets, the lower definition you use. And what we actually do is we swap out the visual model. So we're going to use a lower resolution visual thing, but it's not just visuals. You know, the further that we go, we're going to lower the physics quality. You know, on Need for Speed, what we did was if another car got more than, I guess, about 200 meters ahead or behind of you on the track, we would shut off the physics altogether, and it would just follow like a spline down the road, like something on rails. And the more that you do this, the less load you have on your CPU. So in Need for Speed, you can put more cars on the track. In our game, you know, in Dead Rising 3 that came out last year, we could put more zombies in the world. So another thing that you can do is less frequent updates. You're going to find out about update loops in Unity this weekend. And in your update loop, one of the parameters that gets passed in is the delta time. So if I have something that updates 30 times a second, I get that, 33 millisecond delta time every time it updates. Well, why don't we change that number? The further something gets away from me, let's update it less often. You know, if I have pathfinding, I might need to update it only once every 3 or 4 seconds. You know, that gives me more CPU time to do other things. Simple collision geometry. In Dead Rising 3, if you have a sniper rifle, we try not to give them out too often, because if you aim it at the zombies in the back of the view and you pull the trigger, you're not going to hit anything because they don't have physics. We've just deleted them. All that you're seeing is a visual model sitting there. You know, and then some of the ones that are about halfway in between, they're basically sitting, their collision volume doesn't look like a person. It's just a cube. You know, it's very simple. Actually, we do spheres because they're even cheaper. Sphere in physics, it's a point and a radius. And that's all you need. AI quality, I guess I talked about that a little bit. We can lower the, if we're pathfinding or something, we can lessen the distance that things are looking ahead of them. Like, so pathfinding, if I wanted to find my way to the bathroom, AI, the way it does it, is it has a map of the world, and it sort of steps along till it finds the shortest path to the bathroom down the hall. The further something gets away, I can just I can shorten how far it's looking, so the AI might think, hey, I can only look 20, 30 feet in front of me. Okay, where can I go? Well, I know these are all dead ends. I'm just going to start walking this way and hope I eventually get this bathroom in sight. Otherwise, there's going to be problems. You can run simpler state graphs. If you have a very complex AI brain, you know, that's running a lot of things, trying to do a lot of different stuff, the further away that they get, make it simpler. Give it only 1 or 2 abilities when it's far away. You know, when it's close, it doesn't need to know that hand-to-hand combat. Don't even worry about it. Shorter pathfinding we just talked about, and etc. So, again, why am I here? I could be in Vancouver right now, hanging out with my friends, on my boat, you know, fishing, watching orcas go past. I'm here because you guys are doing a game jam, and I want to hire you. So let's have some fun this weekend. Take down my email. I don't hand out business cards because business cards just stack up and you lose them. Take down my email. You can send me an email anytime you want. I promise I will respond. You know, and ask me anything you want. I can tell you anything that isn't confidential. Obviously, the game industry, I am working on a game right now that I'm not allowed to tell you anything about, but it's a lot of fun. We have a team of 150 people, full production. It's going to be a big title. So I think that's my last slide, actually. Yeah. There we go. So let's do a question session, you know, anything. Yes.
What's your favorite game?
My favorite game right now? Right now, Metal Gear Solid, the new one. Is anyone else playing it? Is it absolutely awesome? So, has anyone here finished it? What do you think when you were done? Yeah. Okay. Did you want to play more? Did you find it a little short? So what happened at Konami is there was a business decision made on this, and if you go work in the video game industry, you're going to see a lot of decisions like it would be so cool if we did this, and it all comes down in the end. The reason you're doing this is to make money, and something might be super cool, but if it's not going to make money, it's not going to happen. So they actually had like about another 3 or 4 hours of content that was scheduled to go into that game to complete the story, and they had about another year in the dev cycle. And at one point, the execs looked at it. Somebody in marketing who's trained to analyze this kind of thing said, you know what? If we finish this game, we're not going to sell any more copies than if we ship it the way it is now. So they cut the story where it was. They cut a bunch of features. They cut a bunch of stuff, shipped the thing early. Still made an awesome game, but that's why when you get to the end, you're like, really? That's it? So. Yes?
So what makes you want to make a game by yourself? And you just feel it's really because I will never learn it when you are learning programming?
All the time. Every day. So everyone feels that. It's something that I'm going to talk about in my last presentation here is you're going to go in all the time, especially the first job at a new company, because you're going to be right out of school where you had to take a lot of classes, a lot of different things, like you're not just taking programming, and you're going to come out of school, and on your first day, you're working with a bunch of professional programmers, guys like me, who every day, I woke up at 9 a.m. and I made video games right through until 5 o'clock, a lot of times right through until midnight, and I've been doing that for like 10, 15 years. So I have so much more experience, and Jordan over here from Noodle Cake, he has so much more experience. And don't let it get to you, because you're going to see this as like, some of you might be used to, in high school you're probably the smartest person in your class. And now you're in university and you're thinking, yeah, I'm like smarter than all my friends, I know all this stuff. And you're going to get to your first job, and everybody there was just like you, was that smartest person. And just worry about what you need to learn. A good thing is your first day on the job, though, or even in your interview, ask what's expected of you when you join. So I'm going to go more into depth in this on the last presentation that I'm going to give on Sunday. I'll go more into depth about what it's like, being in that situation. I totally know what you're feeling. I still feel it all the time. Because I'm like in this management role now where I have to manage people, and suddenly I've gone from being a coder where I can put on my headphones and just do math and write code all day, and suddenly I've got to deal with people who don't want to do certain kinds of work, and I got to make sure that they don't hate their job every day, because they're not going to be productive. It's like a totally different ball game, and so I go to some of the senior execs, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? Yeah.
What is the most exciting moment about developing video games? The first, like the scrapbook, like the first ideas, or the end where you see almost finished and it's like the final stages and it's like almost ready?
Different for everybody. In the beginning, there's a lot of that find the fun. Like we'll have a game concept there that's there's a concept, but everything's kind of a gray area, and we're making a lot of changes. Like I worked in robotics where right from day one, the customer comes to you, they have a spec, we want a robot that does this, 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 and this. Here's how your software needs to run, build it. And you go away and you build it to the spec, and you're done. In video games, you have a concept, and you just run with it, and you find the fun. And so we'll find that some idea doesn't work, and suddenly this tech that I've been working on for like 6 months. Hopefully I haven't worked on it that long by the time it gets cut, but we'll cut something and we'll go in a totally different direction. And this happens all the time. Some people love that. Some people hate it. I hate it. My favorite part of the project is the very end. You know, and the very end is when there's the most pressure. There's the most pressure. There's the most workload. Like, you know, well, like it or not, you're probably going to have to work more than a 40-hour week when you're trying to get a game out the door. But you know what you need to achieve. You know, everything's locked at that point. We hit milestones in the project. Like there's an alpha, there's a beta. When we hit alpha, we're not allowed to change the direction of the game. And so the alpha date is there on the schedule, so all the designers know that they need to have everything figured out and the whole plan for the rest of the project by alpha, right? And then we've got another 8 months or so that, okay, everything is documented, everything is done, we know our goal. And that's when the real work starts for guys like me, but I love it because nobody's changing their mind and nothing that I do gets cut. Bunch of hands, right here. So are you asking which book have I read on programming and design? Or what would change my view? Sorry. Important programming books. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any on design. There's a guy, what's his name? Scott? Who's the guy who wrote Effective C++? There's two of them that you're going to see on everyone's desk in a video game company. For one thing, you got to know C++. That we do well, if you work in mobile, maybe not. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, Swift. We had a great presentation on that earlier today. Yeah, so if you're going to work on console games for a company like Capcom that markets to the PlayStation and the Xbox, you got to know C++. So there's two books called Effective C++ and More Effective C++. And they're written by the same guy, but these are the classics they're amazing. They give you about 40 different things that you need to do, that you should always do in your programs, and they explain why it happens, and highly recommended. And even guys who've been programming for 20 years, you walk around my office, and we've probably got 30 or 40 copies of them, on different people's desks. We're always referencing them. They're really good reads too. They're actually a lot of fun to sit with a copy and read it. So. Scott Myers, that's the guy. Yeah.
At what point did you stop programming?
What point did I start? I had this conversation earlier. I think I was 3. My babysitter was, he had a Commodore VIC-20, and he would bring it over to my house, and I'd start programming. Now, don't let that disgruntle you, because I worked with the guy who is now the lead gameplay engineer on Need for Speed, a guy named Jesse Bank. He learned to program after university. He was about 26 years old, and he did like a geology degree or something and hated his job because he was always going up north. And he's like, I always wanted to make video games, so he learned how to write code, and he is a fantastic engineer. So, anyway, well, I think that hand was first.
Comment on what you think is the most satisfying or compelling gaming, like co-op or multiplayer?
So what Satoru said, and I totally agree with him, is people love playing multiplayer games. The best thing is when you can play a game against each other, against your buddy on the couch, 2-player local, where you each grab a controller. And I'm kind of sad that a lot of games are going away from that. It's like they have trouble doing split screen. I want to sit with my, with my buddy and drink a case of beer on Friday night and play video games. My favorite is, what is it, Super Swing Golf 2 that I played earlier today. What's it called? Stickman Swing. I don't know, but it's awesome. I played it earlier today. I played the multiplayer mode, and that, if you want to play a great game, a really great design game, yeah, Jordan's game is awesome. It's absolutely awesome.
What are your thoughts on virtual reality headsets, and what are your plans for if they become more mainstream? So
virtual reality, well, you got to think of how to make a game with virtual reality, right? I can neither confirm nor deny that we speak with people at Oculus. It's a technology, right? You know, before we used to play games with buttons, then we had this thing, and then, you know, the Kinect came out, but for business reasons, the Kinect kind of flopped. But yeah, controllers keep changing. Right here. What kind of education did I go through? I took a physics degree in university, and I minored in computer science because about halfway through, my physics prof said, you know, if you want to find a job, you should learn how to program. And I was like, well, I know how to program. I said, well, I went to school in Portland, Oregon, actually. I was, yeah.
Either one.
So we do all of our games in C++, but our tools are done in C# usually. You know, that's kind of like asking a mechanic what type of wrench he uses. Everyone in this room, if you can program in one language, you're going to be able to pick up every other language out there. You just have to use it a little bit. It's like holding a new wrench, but you need to identify what the strengths and weaknesses are. Like C# is awesome. If I need to put something together really quickly, like all of our build tools are written in C#, you know, but everything that has to run fast, where we're really conscious about memory, you know, and everything that's actually in the game, that's C++. Here, let's go around the room. Somebody I haven't hit yet. Favorite game to work on? Well, honestly, it was doing the Wii version. Doing the Wii port of Need for Speed Undercover. And it was just because it was for a couple reasons. One is because video game companies, like the big ones, don't really care about the Wii, so you have a lot of freedom. The whole team's working on the Xbox and the PlayStation. They give it to you, say, okay, just make this run on the Wii. So you can do whatever you want. And just this controller is fantastic to use. Also, Nintendo's tools are very simple but very powerful and easy to use. So it was just a great dev environment. I wasn't having to wade through all the features of like Visual Studio and all the other. Microsoft has this tool called Pix that's, you know, it's for profiling, but it's very difficult. It's a very steep learning curve on it, so I didn't have to do that. It depends on the company. A lot of companies come and go. You know, some of the big companies, it depends what's happening at the time. If they treat their employees right, they're going to stick around for a long time if they have good projects. If, you know, like every other business, if you can get some bad stuff going on sometimes, and you can get gigantic groups of people just all leave at once. You know, they either get fed up, or maybe their game bombed and the whole team gets laid off. And, you know, I'll talk more about this on Sunday too at my last presentation. I'd say our turnover right now, though, is we are keeping all of our people, but we have a lot of empty seats still. We're having trouble finding people to hire. There's so many game companies right now. Canadian dollar's really low, so EA is sending all of their stuff to Vancouver. Microsoft, there's a big studio Microsoft has. Disney has a big studio in town now. So there's a lot of places to go work there. And if we give somebody an offer, they're getting an offer from everyone else. It's tough to get them. In the back.
What is it like? How is it felt when they move the game and it gets completely canned by critics?
You know what? It sucks. It like honestly, like so when I think it was Undercover actually. When Undercover came out, we thought it was going to be absolutely awesome. And there was some stuff that went in at the very end. Like most of the team had gone away on vacation, and some stuff went in at the very end that broke the game. And we got like a 56 Metacritic, and which is terrible. And we had a budget of I think the budget was $150 million. That is a gigantic bomb. A lot of people lost their job. You know, and people like me, it's like I worked so hard on this game, put my heart and soul into it, and I was the main character of the game. And then it comes out, and it's like, you know, and you get just thrashed in the reviews, and you want to respond to it, but you can't. You are not allowed to post to the media. You're not allowed to do anything. You just have to You just have to sit there and take it and think about it. Like, you know, I'm still going to work every day making video games for a living, and it's a pretty good gig. You know, I could be scrubbing toilets. What's that? My favorite? C++. You know, it's just because I do the most of.
Yeah, I just learned programming after second year. But I just try to use my knowledge to make my own game, but I just found I cannot connect the thing I learned in university to the real use. So I'm really confused if we just go to work, what will happen, and how does you connect the knowledge from university to the work.
So hopefully a lot of the things that I showed you in this Tricks of the Trade was ways of applying math and numbers that you'd never seen before. You know, like the camera movements on the car. I had no idea how, you know, vector math. The second most important thing, third, you need this GameJam is the first thing on your resume. C++ is second. The third thing, take a linear algebra course. Everything we do in games is vector math. And learning how to apply it, you know, it's like the whole game is just vectors going all over the place.
So when you're just getting your work, have you feel confused or I don't know?
So you're not going to be on your own your first day on the job. You're gonna have somebody mentoring you, and
someone will teach you and lead you, and you will go back on later.
Yes, definitely. And you know, it's just something that you learn. It's a new skill. So, you know, in this GameJam, you're going to get some exposure to this. You're going to be on Sunday. You're going to know so much more about making games than you know right now. And you're going to have a lot of ideas, too. You're going to be like, you know what, I wish I would have done this different. And I like this. I hated this. And these ideas are awesome, because these are the things that I look for when I want to hire somebody. You know, I want somebody coming in who right on their first day has an idea of what they want to do because they've been through it.
So, just last one question.
Oh, yeah.
If it is possible, just you have an idea and if it is possible to make your own game by yourself, just one single person.
You can make a game by yourself, but it's very difficult because you need to do everything. But we've got a couple people in the room who have done that. It's not something I could ever do. But, you know, there's two different sort of businesses. There's guys like the Noodle Cake, a small studio, where there's only a couple people working on a game. And then there's stuff like Capcom, where we have 200 people working for 2 years, and you get one little chunk that's yours, and that's what you do. So I think I saw a hand down here. Yeah.
There are two different main, as you said right now, working for a big company and working in a small company doing most of the stuff and independent development. Obviously, you chose like the Formula One big company. What are the reasons you mostly stay there, and what would make you go independent?
The reason I stay where I am is stability. You know, I like collecting a salary, collecting a paycheck that's a fixed rate. I'm not going to become a millionaire doing what I do, but I can live the life I want to live with that. And this is something everyone's going to have to decide when you're done school. You know, but another thing you can do, my buddy Club Penguin, he went off on his own, did his own thing. He made $1 billion. But for every guy who did that, there's another guy who tried doing it and didn't make any money at all. He would have been better off just, you know, going and scrubbing toilets. Yeah?
Are there people who work in the video game industry that don't have computer science degree?
Oh, tons. Tons. You know, just engineering's just one side of it, and there are quite a few who don't have computer science degrees. I would say if you are going to be a programmer, though, it definitely helps to be able to do that. If not, I'll talk about this more on Sunday. You know, it helps if you have some kind of tangible demo, though, to show people, like, you can write code and you wrote an app and you can talk about it intelligently. Yeah, otherwise, you know, there are definitely, like, it's a business. There's management, there's accounting, there's, you know, any other career you can think of in a business. We probably have it. So, in the back.
How do you feel about the open development environment and the crowdsourced nature of Star Citizen, and do you think it will have an effect on how developers view sort of what people want and how they're going to respond to that?
So I don't know what Star Citizen is, actually. I I should probably research it.
The single most crowdsourced project. It's basically a team got together and like, hey, we're gonna make this big badass space sim, and we're just gonna like have random people crowdsource it, and they've got like they're getting close to $90 million and.
So that's like crowdsourcing is something that happens all the time in games anyway. It doesn't happen as much in a big company like Capcom because we have our own financial backing. But I'll say I think there's about 120 video game companies in Vancouver right now, and all of them are getting money from somewhere. All the small ones. It's like they don't just get 5 guys into a room and start making a game. Well, some of them do, but there are other ones who have some kind of there's some sort of angel investor. Somebody in behind them is pumping in a bit of money, you know, to give those guys space and a computer and development kit so they can actually make their game.
So one of the things that I find particularly interesting about Star Citizen is you were talking about earlier how a lot of the really neat things that you see in games don't really, or that you might want in games, don't get into it because business is there. You don't feel like this make a lot of money. But Star Citizen is crowdfunded nature. They don't have these investors to look at that are going to tell them, no, you need shit today. They have the freedom to say, no, we're going to like spend extra time to make this right. And they have like tens of millions of dollars to work with.
So, but there's still, it's still money coming in one end and features coming out the other. So they are making decisions. You know, I'm sure they have a drawing board somewhere that's got 100 different things that they want to put in the game, but they haven't had the time to do it yet. They don't have the manpower to do it. So that's all it is. And as long as money keeps coming in from somewhere, you know, if it's crowdsourcing or an investor or wherever, that translates into features coming out the other end. So, one more. Who should I ask? You pick somebody who hasn't asked something yet.
Sure. So if you get hired by Capcom and you're not from Vancouver, do they help relocate you?
Yes. Yeah. So totally. Yeah. No, totally they do that. Yeah. I'll talk about that on Sunday too. Who else hasn't asked something yet? Somebody? Have you asked anything? Okay.
What's the Capcom's policy on sign program?
So you need to get approval for it. You know, there are a lot of stories of people going out moonlighting and doing stuff. If you're making another game, chances are they're going to say no. But you know, you do need to sign. You go to the legal department and say, hey, I want to make this iPhone app. Like, let's say you want to make a Twitter app. Okay, that doesn't compete with any of our products. So, yeah, go ahead. You know, here's this waiver form that says you're allowed to write a Twitter app. You know, if you wanted to go make your own mobile game, they would say no. You know, you work for us. Anything that you do towards gaming belongs to Capcom.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. Let's give him a hand.